Hi guys, welcome back to OCD Real Talk. We have a very special guest with us today. Say hi, Erica. You may
Hi.
have seen her on our channel. She has done a lot of videos on how to support someone with OCD in your family or your partner, whoever it is that you're supporting. And she has some great advice over here. So we thought we'd bring her in here and yeah, just discuss her journey as a supporter with Nix.
Yeah,
I
her
mean,
new video is
genuinely,
going to be called "How to Not Lose Your Mind When You're Dating."
exactly.
When
I
you're
think
dating
Because I
Nick.
lost it before.
I think anyone in Nick's life needs to do a talk on, how the experience of being in Nick's life. So, Erica, I think what I really wanted to know was because we've not talked about this, so I genuinely don't know. Um, what was your perception of OCD or what OCD is before like Nick had a diagnosis for it?
I mean, you always hear people say, "Oh, I'm a little OCD about how things are organized or whatever." So that was my perception just because it had been so normalized in normal everyday conversations and so I
Yeah.
just thought that it was people. I mean, I knew that it could get extreme with, people washing their hands a bunch of times, but I didn't know that there were different types of OCD. I thought it was pretty much like germs and organization.
Mm.
So that was kind of my perception. So when Nick came to me, I mean, I was there when his OCD started presenting itself, but when he said, I can't stop thinking about my blinking, I didn't really know what he was talking about. And so he
Mm.
eventually started doing some research and figured out that it was OCD. So
Mm.
yeah, I didn't realize that there were all these other different types of OCD before going through this.
Yeah. And just a side note, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you are someone, at least in the conversations I've had with you, I've sometimes felt like maybe you are someone who likes things in a particular way. In just something sometimes you've said. So have you ever like used that, or has anyone ever said, "Oh, Erica is a little OCD," or like something like that?
I don't think anyone has ever said that to me. Sorry, the dog just fell up the stairs. I don't think anyone has ever said that to me. I know
Mm.
that it's been my habit when things feel chaotic to want to try to control and micromanage everything. So definitely like my way or the highway kind of thing when things get a little bit chaotic.
Okay. Yeah.
But they've never made the comment of she's a little OCD about stuff. It was
Okay.
more so
Okay.
my way or the highway.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it
Okay.
wasn't. I would say even I got that like on an organizational because of like the way my closet is and stuff like that, or like my notes. So
I mean,
Yeah, you're also
so
over
let's just put it
organized.
this way. There's no OCD with my desk. It's very, very
yeah, like her
chaotic.
her desk moment, like her workstation is like one of those like organized, organically growing messes where I'm
I
like,
know where
Oh,
everything
okay.
is, but then he'll try to organize it and I yell at him because I'm like, I know where things are, even though you don't touch it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very interesting because I think like with me when because I had contamination, people didn't quite like obviously fully understand because they thought, oh, you must really like things to be in a certain way. I'm like, no, that's not it. Because when you came to my room, because I wouldn't touch anything, there was dust collecting on things. Like if there was, for example, just a pair of socks on the couch, it would be there for like 2 weeks. I wouldn't even touch it. I would be terrified to even go near it.
Right.
So and obviously the mess would start collecting and things would be disorganized because for me it made things certain for me of what I could touch, what I could not touch, and for the contamination to remain in a certain boundary and not like come out of that boundary. So technically my life was a mess. If you looked at my closet, complete mess. But
Mhm.
so and then that sometimes confuse people like, oh, but don't you have OCD? And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. Like that's not how it works.
Right.
Um so okay, so that was your before. So how did you start to like learn more about it? Like, did you have continued conversations with Nick about it when he started realized that he had OCD? How
It
did it
was
work?
definitely a lot of education from him. So anytime that he would learn something new, he'd be sharing it with me, or even started when he started watching the OCD recovery videos, talking about the different types of OCD. And then
Mm,
once I started hearing about that kind of stuff, I was like, wow, I really didn't understand OCD at all, even though we had, learned about it in class, but it wasn't, it was like there's an obsession and then there's a compulsion to decrease that anxiety. That was like the extent of our learning of what
yeah.
OCD was. Um, but yeah, a lot of it was education from Nick, and then he would have me watch some of the videos as well.
You read some of the books on the
Mhm.
reading list. You read Stubbornly Refused, Man's Search for Meaning,
And
Paul
I
David,
Last a
I'll
Light.
Ask the Light. So she read the books. And I think this
Oh,
is
okay.
actually really important to actually say, just if I could interject. For friends and family members, you have no obligation to do that. But I think it
Yeah.
does make the journey a little bit easier when you have an understanding of beliefs. That way you can, I mean, remember towards the middle of the journey, like earlier last year, middle of last year, 21, where you would no longer just give me reassurance. Like you were just like, okay. And it was because you had learned how the disorder operated.
And you had mentioned like how I was before all of this happened. And I mean, I was already previous to this, I was already in therapy trying to work on my control issues. um, so that was helpful, especially, I mean, it got really bad for my control issues when Nick's dad started dying, because I wanted to micromanage everything so that he would be okay, which in reality doesn't actually make anything okay, but
Yeah.
I perceived that it did. Um, but like going through this and listening to what he's learning, and then also kind of learning the same principles alongside him, I do think that it helped a lot with the control issues. I mean, every once in a while it does rear its head, but it's definitely nowhere near what it used to be. And I'm not anxious because again, it was an underlying anxiety
Mm,
thing where I wanted to control things.
yeah.
So I was getting anxious and thinking that control was going to be the solution to that. But
So,
I
so
don't get
like while trying to understand what Nick was going through, simultaneously you were also having an understanding of like what was internally happening with you as well. Then,
Yes, yeah. So a lot of the things that
yeah,
he was learning were applicable to me. I just wasn't,
yeah,
feeling like I was in a panic attack 24/7.
yeah.
And I didn't have a specific obsession like, OCD sufferers do. I just, I had a control issue.
And I think like as OCD sufferers, I mean, Nick, obviously you and I both know that we think that we're the only person suffering. Like other people, even though they have their problems and their issues, they're fine. We're the ones suffering. We're the ones going through the tough time. What do they have to complain about?
Man, I cannot tell you how much I unfortunately held that against Erica. Like like an
Mm,
unfortunate amount of times. And it's
yeah,
just very, very it is an unfair behavior. Like
yeah,
the behavior itself is unfair and it's undeserving because all it does is create animosity and resentment in you towards me because Erica had a perception and a feeling like she couldn't talk about anything in her life. I'm
mm,
assuming that was correct.
Yeah, I mean, for a while, and this was partially my fault too, for a while I felt like, well, I'm not suicidal, so I shouldn't be complaining about something,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. And
Um,
yeah, we forget that like other people, even though they may not have OCD, they still have completely significant struggles of their own personal journeys. Like people are trying to change themselves as people. They're trying to like change some of their unhealthy habits. They've been through something in the past that they're trying to like still come to terms with. Like there's so much that people have in their own lives. So we're really not the only ones suffering in life, and we should stop giving people in OCD sufferers, I feel like, do tend to give people in the immediate environment a really hard time.
Mhm.
With a lot of things, like if people in their environment do not follow certain rules or do not like they're not mindful of certain triggers and whatnot. Like people with OCD give them hell. Like we speak to people in the Facebook group and even in the WhatsApp group, like where people are just feeling really angry, really, really angry and bitter towards their families for not understanding them enough, or triggering them, or doing the wrong thing, or not following contamination rules and whatnot. So yeah, and unfortunately that happens. Yeah, but we need to be compassionate towards our family members too.
Absolutely.
I
No,
mean,
for sure.
we had, I wouldn't call it an argument, but I was a little bit upset with him the other night because I think that
Mm,
this still to a certain degree, not nearly the same degree that it used to, but
yeah,
it's still every once in a while I kind of feel like if I have a problem, if I don't have OCD, then it's still not as bad.
yeah.
And Nick has come a long way in that department, but like the other day I had a headache from 5 a.m. until the minute I went to bed. So, and we're chiropractors and we can help with that. And so I wanted him to help with that and didn't really feel like he was taking it too seriously. And so I got kind
yeah.
of upset. I'm like, if you wanted to the help, I would be helping you. And
The confirmation bias needs to be addressed, because it's like
Mm,
this. Like, this is a very simple example from what I've noticed. Let's say you work in an HIV clinic, and all day long you see and breathe HIV treatment. If someone shows a sign of something, they've done studies on this, that doctor will be like, maybe it's HIV. They did it with a doctor who was working in a pulmonary embolism clinic. They changed
yeah,
hospitals and they misdiagnosed blood clots incorrectly for like the first 2 weeks because they were so
yeah,
used to seeing it. This is why I constantly have to remind myself that there are people out there that just because they don't have OCD, they have other problems, structural problems, psychological problems,
yeah.
anxiety issues. But it is very easy to do this. Ready? Someone messages you at 3 in the morning.
Mm,
I don't want to do this anymore. I want to end my life. And then you hear someone in the street go, "Oh, do you believe it? My coffee size is wrong." Like, it's very easy for the brain to go, you're ungrateful. It's easy to do that, but that's not what's happening.
yeah.
It's the self-awareness needed for that. I need to work on that a lot. I actually have a question moment I think will be good for Erica to answer.
Mm.
What was the darkest time that you had to go through with me? Was it the mental hospital? What was it?
I can think of a few separate instances. The hospital is definitely one of them. And I don't know that a lot of it blurs together after we moved. But I do remember there was one night you were playing video games. I was so frustrated. I don't remember if it was the same night or two separate nights that this happened, but at one point I called my mom and I was crying and I told her all I want to do is run. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this. Um, and then somewhere along that same time frame, I remember laying in bed, crying myself to sleep, and literally, this sounds so weird, but literally giving myself a hug because there was nobody else to give me a hug. Because you were
Mm,
all playing video games, you were in your own suffering. It was mid-pandemic, everything was shut down. We didn't know anybody.
yeah.
Um, and so I just remember literally laying in bed in the fetal position, like hugging myself because I was the only person
Mm,
there to give myself a hug. So
yeah.
I didn't think I was gonna cry on this call.
No, but it's the truth. I mean, and I think the one thing like that happens. I don't know if moment you were like this. I became like completely like flat for just like 3 years. Like I was like incapable of feeling an emotion. Like if I wasn't like
Mm,
angry, like
same, same.
I couldn't get
Yeah.
sad. Like, I know this sounds really brutal. I could watch something in real life that could be like tragic. Like maybe someone got into a car accident and got injured. That would never, like, I would just be like it wouldn't do anything to sway me because I was in like this other state. So it was hard looking at you because I would see you cry or see you upset and I like couldn't feel anything. Like I wasn't like,
Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, I feel so bad. Like I knew inside I'm like, wow, I'm really like tortured.
Logically, you feel bad, logically, but not emotionally.
No,
And I
yeah.
completely, I was like that. I definitely was. And I think like, if, I don't know, and this has nothing to do with suffering from OCD, but I think as I started to enter my 20s and I started to become generally like a calmer person, my tone, like in talking as well, started to become very like, calmer as well in a way. And sometimes people were like, "What, you are so monotone," or like you don't have like a lot of variation in your tone. And I'd be like, "What, really? I don't know." And then there were instances and where I was on a family vacation with my sister, and with my family actually, and my sister was just like, and I was enjoying, and because at that point especially I wasn't really suffering anymore, and emotions had started to come back anyway. But I was genuinely enjoying like that vacation, and but my sister was like, "Moment, why is your expression so flat all the time? Why are you so expressionless all the time? Are you not even enjoying?" And I'm like, "I am enjoying." She's like, "You're lying. Your like face tells me you're not enjoying." But like, no, I am feeling emotion on the inside. So I don't know. It just became. It took me a while to even, I think, start to express emotionally as well, because I'd become so emotionally numb. And also just to like put this out there, I've also grown up in an environment with just a lot of instability in the country as well. So like hours and hours of like electricity not being in houses. Every single day or every other day there are like multiple bomb blasts happening in a week around the country. This was like around the time 2007 to 2009. And even then, by the way, like when beyond a certain point, when there was a bomb blast, it would be like, "Oh, another bomb blast. Hey, so what's for dinner?" So it became like, so you become so desensitized, and especially when you're suffering with OCD, I think, because it becomes such a like this kind of reality for you, that you kind of shut the world out, and you're like, "Okay, you're having a bad day. What's new? So hey, so have you watched that movie tonight?" Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, it's just a very strange place to be in.
It's almost like you get emotionally exhausted, and I felt like I did too, where again, and it was similar for me too. Again, there's a lot of parallels here, but I at some point was my friends would be telling me their problems, and I'd be like, that sucks. I mean, I had nothing else to give. I was just so emotionally exhausted. And I feel, looking back on it now, I feel bad for some of my friends because they were telling me some of their problems, and they're like, I know that you're not the person that I should be complaining to, because they knew that what I was going through. But even then, like that, I don't want
Mm,
to be the person that they feel like they can't say these things to, because
yeah.
I'm going through something harder. Like I
It's a
don't know.
case, but it's a case by case basis. You used a really good example. It's like if you have 10 court cases that are all for capital murder, all 10 of them are different. They have different aspects of them,
Yeah,
and you have to
yeah,
remove your bias from each case. And when you're dealing with someone who has OCD and has horrific housebound OCD, that doesn't make them any less worthy or more worthy than a person who's like 12 years old and doesn't have OCD. So it's like I have to look at people on these like
exactly.
case to case basis. If you don't do that, resentment can rise because your belief will start to dictate your bias.
100%.
And the other question I think,
Absolutely, absolutely.
real quick moment,
Oh,
I think
okay.
the other question I have for Erica, which I think is really important for people to really hear, what would you say are some actionable steps that a friend or a family member who finds this video, I'm assuming hopefully there's gonna be mothers and fathers watching this, because there's a lot of kids that I work with and that have had their parents on the call. How
Actually, before Erica answers that, I'll also insert my question, because I think that just goes hand in hand
hmm?
with also recommending steps. So, like, Erica, what I also wanted to know was, well, Erica must feel so special, like both of us, like, Erica, answer our question. But no, my question was that, do you feel like you, and I know the answer, but I kind of want to hear how you conceptualize it. Do you feel like you've had to completely adjust your life to Nick's recovery journey? And if so, does does that bring up, or has that in the past brought up resentment for you?
At first, I did feel like I needed to structure my life around his OCD. Not necessarily to like give into his well, I guess maybe to a certain degree, yeah, give into his compulsions. The video games were a huge compulsion, and so I was rationalizing, like making up excuses for it, or telling our friends like, oh, he's not coming out for XYZ reason, or making excuses for why he wasn't in class. So yeah, there was that. As we got through some of his recovery, I started doing that less and less because I realized it was just enabling. So when he would wake up and say, I'm not going to work, I would say, okay, well, you have to be the one to text our boss and tell him why, because I'm not doing it. I'm not making up excuses for you anymore. So at first I did feel like I was doing a lot to work around his OCD. But as I started to learn more about what was not helpful and started realizing that I was just being an enabler, that started to change. So
Yeah, I think, yeah, because I think one thing that we all can relate to, and I think this is a really good for friends and family to hear this from our perspective moment, is that we,
Yeah.
we are literally professional. Like when things in our life that need to get done that require like any extra effort outside of recovery, we're so good at like weaseling our way out of those activities. Like I would be like, oh yeah, but like I don't have to clean, or like, oh, the dogs
I'll
don't
clean
need,
tomorrow.
oh, the
And then
dogs don't
tomorrow
need to
turns
be yet.
into a month from now.
Yeah.
And so
It's like you have this like,
Absolutely.
yes, yes, yes. That's how it goes.
Master manipulator. Master, I would say, like, master manipulator in that sense, like.
Yes,
And
yes.
even in conversation, like when we need reassurance, or when we need to like confess something, we might not be doing it in an outright way, but we're very carefully crafting the conversation to go in a certain direction, using keywords to push the conversation in that direction, and like and we end up getting what we want in that sense. So so all people who have a fear of being a psychopath, you maybe already are. Like, I'm not actually talking about it, you already are.
Oh my God. It is so incredibly true. Like I remember I would think things like, oh my God, like it's so just so like family and friends again, what it feels like to us. A simple phone call. Like, oh my God, I have to make that phone call today. Oh, I'm so
You know, that's
tired.
so interesting, Nick. That is so interesting because literally just before this call, I wrote this topic down for writing a post tomorrow, like phone related anxiety. And this is one of the points in there. Just like when my phone started to ring, it was like, oh, blah, 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 and I wouldn't pick up the call when I got the call. I would just put it away, and then I would call back later, because something about getting a phone call and answering it just made me so anxious.
I think that's why I was able to get him to go to work more days than, like when I said,
Mm.
okay, you're gonna have to call or text the boss, because he didn't want to do that. He went to work. So
Yep,
I'm
yep.
like, all right, well,
It is
see you
crazy.
later.
It's crazy too. Like I remember just like my life moment. This is hard for people to really, except for the kids I played with. The kids I played Call of Duty with competitively, I played with them for 10 years. I've known them for 10 years. I've never met them in person. It's hilarious. And
Mhm.
if they were like serious gamers moment, like real serious. And I remember what Dakota said to me one time, and it gave me chills. He said something like, I'm a big gamer and I game a lot, but you have a problem. And I was like, whoa.
Whoa.
He was like,
No,
dude,
that actually,
yeah,
yeah, that sounds a lot even
he
for
would be
me.
like, we would play for 10 hours. I would go to sleep for 8 hours, come back online, which is already not healthy. And he goes, you would be online still. You would have never went to sleep. And he's like, I would be like, wow, like he's really, and he would be like, he's married. Like, how is he doing this? And it was kind of this wake up call but as Erica, like, again, this is important for friends and family to hear from our perspective. You can only do so much because she screamed at me to get better, and I just didn't want to get better.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to until one day where I really kind of made this decision because I knew logically, that you were days away from leaving me. I could feel it, like the disconnect.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's leaving for sure. But those real quick, back to those actionable steps. What would you say those are for friends and family, like if they're watching, that you could give them from your advice?
I think being open-minded to the fact that maybe what you think is best for the person is not actually what's best. Being open to being wrong. Learning about what is actually helpful for recovery is a big one, because I've said this a million times. I wanted to coddle you. I wanted to like hug and be nice and loving and coddle you, essentially, is all I wanted to do, because it felt better to do that. It felt very uncomfortable to practice tough love and tell you to text the boss yourself.
So uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. So uncomfortable.
So, but you know, my initial instinct was, if somebody's going through something hard, you should be gentle with them. And maybe that's true for certain things and with certain people, depending on who they are or what they're going through. But in this case in particular, it was absolutely not the right decision. It was just making things worse. So the dog almost knocked over the light.
Actually, I don't even hear or see the dog, so
they're like under. We're in the glass table right now. They're like if you're looking at like an aquarium, they're like going underneath and like hitting our legs. They go underneath the table moment. They go like this. They just stare.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't even hear them, so it's all good.
That's good.
I want to say one thing. I think this is really just, and I'll let you finish the rest of those points. I mean, Rob and I talk about this quote, and I think this is so applicable for like a friends and family member to hear. Is if you don't know who Jim Rohn is, he was Tony Robbins' mentor. He died in 2007, and one of his famous keynote speeches, he said, you know, the number one sign of human maturity is personal responsibility. And the reason why that's such an important quote is again, if you, from what I saw, if you are so strongly adamant about getting the other person better, and like Moment and I are just like this, okay, like we're not going to get better, you literally will kind of drive yourself a little insane, because you're going to be trying so hard. This is something that I had trouble with in the other way, like trying to get you to understand. I'm like, you need to understand what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this doesn't go.
And I think like even, sorry, go ahead, Erika.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't work when you want it more for somebody else. I mean, I sit in the other room when he's doing a lot of his calls with people, and their loved one will be on the phone and they're doing either all the talking and it's very, very clear that the person who's suffering wants it less than the person who is either paying for the sessions or, you know, talking on the other end, because the other person, the sufferer, doesn't want to talk or whatever it is. It's in those cases, I mean, you can't force somebody to want it. They have to want it. It has to be an intrinsic thing. And that was something that I struggled with for a long time, because I wanted him to get better so bad. And I knew he could. I knew that he had the fortitude to do it. It was just the actual action of doing it that getting there was the problem.
Action is difficult. It is difficult for us.
Yeah. And I think like for someone like me, I think I used to have, when I was younger, I used to have a savior complex. So for me, like it was like, oh, like I can help this person change. I can help this person be better. But I mean, and I'm so glad I learned this like at an early point in my life, where I was like, no, like the person has to save themselves. I can only perhaps maybe guide them or support them as best as I can, but I cannot make them do or not do something. That's completely their own responsibility. And now, like when I see people, there have been people in my life where they've come to me for advice and venting and just like, what do I do? What should I do? And I've given them advice, and then I meet them 2 weeks later, a month later, 2 months later, and they're like, and they're doing this exact same thing. They're in the same exact same problem. So then like I'm like, okay, then, and I don't feel bad. Like for I don't take it upon myself. It's not like, oh my god, maybe I should have given better advice. It's like, okay, I said what I needed to say. It's up to the other person whether like they think they should follow it.
I
So
think that's a really
yeah.
good point. I've had two in the last year, Beth being one of them, the sleep coach that we work with. She's great. I had a one-to-one with Beth, and she was asking me tips about coaching. She's like, what was the best piece of advice I can give you? You might have heard me say this. And I had another person in like here in Colorado Springs who saw my videos and wanted to meet with me in person and was like, hey, I own a coaching business. Can you give me tips? And I said to
Yeah.
both of them, I said, the number one thing that works the best for me is detaching yourself as best as you can from your worth if you help them or not. That was
Yeah.
really hard for me. And I had a savior
Yeah.
complex too. I just never, Erica called me on that many times.
And that was when Nick's dad was dying. That's where my control issue was stemming from. A large part of it was I wanted to fix everything for him so that I could be, it was the savior complex. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that unfortunately, I mean, we see Disney movies and princesses and the princess meets the prince and they live happily ever after. Or we see these other movies where it's like this bad boy, if you want to call him that, then he meets this girl and then he changes his whole life
Changes.
approach, and
Yeah.
she's the reason he changed, and it's very romantic. And I think that that's where a lot
Yeah.
of it stems from, is like, I want to be the reason that somebody changes, whether it's from like a romantic relationship, a friendship, or whatever. It's kind of this
Absolutely.
romanticized idea that somebody's going to change because of you. And I think that that's where
Yeah.
a lot of
What?
these issues stem from, is like, that's a message
And
that you've been told.
They're like,
it can very easily become like, from it can easily go from something being fulfilling to suddenly becoming like extremely frustrating and extremely like you start becoming bitter and resentful, like of yourself, of the other person, and just yeah, doesn't do any good, doesn't it do any good at
absolutely.
all.
Now we have about 5 minutes left because I got another call after this, but I wanted to ask you a final question. One piece of advice, without a doubt, when it comes to taking care of yourself, like
Yeah.
what would you tell them is very important in that regard?
I wasn't good at this, so it's not the greatest. I don't know that I'm the best at giving advice for this. I got better. I would try to go to the gym. There was that one instance where you were texting me saying, where are the meds? Where did you hide them? And then said, never mind, I found them. So I got off the bike I was on and ran home. But it can look different for everybody, whether or not that's going to the gym or simply just making sure that you're sleeping, like going to bed at a decent hour instead of staying up trying to get you off of video games. Like, it can look different for everybody, but it's going to be a lot harder trying to support the person if you don't have enough within yourself to be able to support yourself. Again, like we didn't know anybody here. I only knew Nick. I knew the people at work. We both worked at work. I didn't want to be, going to work and spewing all this stuff at work. So I was literally laying in bed, giving myself a hug. So, I don't know. You have to be able to take care of yourself first before you want to be able to help somebody else. But I don't know that there is like a specific tip that I can give somebody on how to do that, because it's an internal thing.
Yeah.
It's just like you can't change somebody else. You also can't force somebody to put themselves first. It has to be something intrinsic within them.
I think maybe the summary is, don't forget to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, don't forget
Yeah.
don't forget, like, your hygiene matters, like your health matters, because
Absolutely.
it's very easy to, like, as an OCD sufferer, when we're suffering, it's just the reality. We can have this like dark cloud around us that is can be contagious. Like you said, Moment.
I think if I were to give advice on it, it would be to have some sort of a separation. Like, don't be completely absorbed in it all day long. There was a day where I went and just got Thai food by myself because I didn't want to be around the black cloud that was in our house.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean,
black cloud.
we can make, like, we can make walls die. Like, I don't know how to phrase it. Like, that's how bitter we can be. That's how negative we can be, and exude that kind of like vibe and energy to other people around us. So before this ends, I just want to say that we are going to have a webinar for friends and family very soon. We're going to put it in the schedule, and we can have Erica pop in and, like, give her amazing wisdom to us. I'm also going to link the playlist of videos that Erica has done on this topic in the description below. So do check that out. Post any questions you have for Erica, and for us as well, and we can answer them, and she can answer them for you when she sees them, or in the webinar if you come on there.
Awesome.
So it was great to have you here, and I think we should do another part 2 because I have more questions that I want to ask you. But
no,
yeah,
we could do.
great.
I have a good idea. We could get Sam and his girlfriend on. Sam's girlfriend.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
And maybe we can get Jade and Paul on, her husband. We've got 3 of us, all people who really have seen it. So, guys, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Take care, guys. Bye.